Phyllis, as we get going, or Bill, as we get going, we have a couple of people who have been absent for a little bit. Could you all give us updates real quick, you and Mark?
Oh, well,
I'm sure we understand that.
did you want me to give a report? Was that it?
I'm sorry, I was sitting too close. Yes, if you don't mind, real quick, Bill for yourself, and then Mark, if you're okay, kind of giving
Their perspective on the miracle that the body is as a physician who is also a person of faith. That was just a wonderful gift to us, and we're still kind of in the afterglow of that. As we said early on, our bodies are simply our way of being and existing and walking around on this earth. But nothing so intricately designed could just have come about randomly, where there's that much detail and that much creation. There must be a creator. We've looked at cells and bones and skin and blood, and we've kind of learned that we have 206 bones in our bodies wrapped up in 650 muscles, 7 miles of nerve fibers in your body. That's why nobody can pinch you anywhere without you flinching. You're going to feel it. Your heart pumping blood, beating 36 million times on the average per year. You have 60,000 miles of veins and arteries and vessels running through your body, delivering red blood cells, oxygen, and nutrients to your cells all over your body. Remember when we talked about cells, we said there's no cell in your body more than a hair width away from a blood vessel or a capillary. And then to think that your brain has trillions, 60 trillions, or trillions of nerve cells and connectors. And we think about that and we think, that doesn't even compare to the computer. We are so fearfully and wonderfully made. We just can hardly imagine it. And then to think that this God who paid such attention to all those details so that our bodies would operate properly, he designed you for a purpose. He designed you for a relationship with him. That's just too marvelous to even think about. I have so enjoyed Ginger's reading of the 139th Psalm during these sessions, and she's going to read us that passage again today from another translation. So, Ginger, would you please read to us from Psalm 139, please? And let us know what translation you're reading.
Surely. The Contemporary English Version today of 139. You have looked deep into my heart, Lord, and you know all about me. You know when I'm resting and when I'm working. And from heaven, you discover my thoughts. You notice everything I do and everywhere I go. Before I even speak a word, you know what I will say. And with your powerful arm, you protect me from every side. I can't understand all of this. Such wonderful knowledge. It's far above me. Where could I go to escape from your spirit or from your sight? If I were to climb up to the highest heavens, you would be there. If I were to dig down to the world of the dead, you would also be there. Suppose I had wings like the dawning day and flew across the ocean. Even then, your powerful arm would guide and protect me. Or suppose I said, I'll hide in the dark until night comes to cover me over. But you see in the dark, because daylight and dark are all the same to you. You are the one who put me together inside my mother's body. And I praise you because of the wonderful way you created me. Everything you do is marvelous. Of this, I have no doubt. Nothing about me is hidden from you. I was secretly woven together out of human sight, but with your own eyes, you saw my body being formed. Even before I was born, you had written in your book everything about me. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Ooh, how marvelous is all that. Ralph, I will tell you that we can no longer see the group.
You know,
We can hear you, Phyllis. Keep going.
Oh, okay. One of the things I really do want you to remember about this session is that we don't have souls. We are souls walking around in these fearfully and wonderfully made bodies for a certain time. These walking around, breathing, sinning, doing good bodies. Oh, thank you. Now we can see you. The soul is the total self. And when we think about the self, Bill likes to describe the self as made up of three components: what you think, what you feel, and what you do. The head, the heart, and the hands. And today, we're going to concentrate a little bit more on this region, the head, the what we think part. So I begin by asking you a question. Who or what most influences what you think? Somebody please speak up.
My family.
Family?
Well, this is Roger. I think to some degree that we do.
Mhm.
So we allow, we're told to capture every thought. And so I remember we did a Bible study over at another church. We said you can't stop birds from flying over your head, but you don't have to let them make a nest in your hair. And it's the same with negative thoughts. That's a good one.
Good. That's a good one. I'm going to remember that. Somebody else?
I mean, to me, some of it's voluntary and some of it's involuntary, right? You think about if you want to focus on a certain group of thoughts, you can do that. But sometimes somebody gets you to focus on something, even if you don't want to. Like, don't think about your breathing right now, as an example, right?
Oh, good one. Okay, well, you've talked about some of these influences. How do these influences enter your body?
Through your senses.
Senses,
All of
absolutely. Mostly by what we hear and by what we see. So we're going to talk about that today. The ears and the eyes, not only do they give us the ability to see and hear, they also provide for us focus and even balance. They are God's way of giving us receptors to receive information that's constantly coming into us from around us. And to a very large extent, they influence what we think. Now, did anybody do your homework from the note? Did anybody sit quietly for just a moment yesterday and pay attention to what you heard? Bill?
Yes.
And that's it. Well, you do that a lot around here. But I saw you out
Phyllis,
the deck yesterday afternoon.
yeah, Phyllis and I decided to set out in the sun for a little bit because we were starting to look like we were prisoners, getting so white. But while I was sitting out there, I tried to do my homework. I closed my eyes and just listened to the wind, to the birds. I just listened, and I heard also the clacking of machinery off in the distance, creating progress, quote.
Anybody else? Elaine?
We did the same thing. We sat out on the deck and one of us fell asleep. But we could hear the birds and the wind chimes were blowing. It was just so peaceful out there.
Yes. That deep breathing probably helped him just to relax and go to sleep.
Phyllis, it's Jim.
All right, Jim.
Yes, ma'am. I was sitting on the back porch trying to do that homework exercise when I heard the ding on my phone, and it was your marvelous message about Bill's results.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, our ears are amazing. They're strange looking little protuberances from our heads, but they have little tiny bones in them that are vibrating and sending signals to our brain constantly. And then the brain interprets those signals, those vibrations, into intelligible sounds. And we can differentiate those sounds, just like those of you who just reported. You could hear the wind, you could hear the birds, you could hear machinery, you could hear your phone dinging, and you didn't have to stop and think, what was that? You knew immediately. You can hear, just think about this. You can hear the drop of a pin or the racing motors of motorcycles. You can hear, and everything in between, beautiful music, bird sounds, the whispers of someone you love. But the mechanical thing that happens is when the vibrations enter your ear, they cause your eardrum to vibrate. And Cheryl can tell us a whole lot about that this morning, as she has a perforated eardrum, which is very, very painful to her and probably causing a lot of issues that she'll be glad that when they're over. But there are three tiny little bones in that part of your ear. They're the smallest of those over 200 bones in your body. And what's amazing is those bones were fully developed when you were an 18-week-old fetus. That eardrum, those bones have been vibrating, sending signals to your brain since that time. And how they figure all this out, I don't know. I just have to trust the scientists and the doctors. But they say a 7-month fetus can actually respond to its mother's voice. And those are the only 3 bones in your body that don't grow anymore. When you're born, they are the size they're going to be for your lifetime. And they, as they receive those signals, those mechanical vibrations turn into electrical activity that reach your brain to help you interpret what you hear. It's just absolutely amazing that we can hear and distinguish sounds. And they have the ability to do this because inside this little canal that's down inside your ear, there are about 25,000 little cilia, little tiny, probably microscopic kind of little hairs that stand up like fence posts in a row. But each one of those is designed by God to respond to a certain vibration. And that's why it converts the mechanical energy to electrical energy, and then the brain interprets so that you know if it's the motorcycle or if it's somebody whispering to you. You can determine those sounds. There's also the miraculous thing to me is that we can remember. I can sit here right now and I can remember my mother when I was a child. I can hear her voice in my head. And you probably learned that little chorus. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little ears, what you hear. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little ears, what you hear. I can still remember my mama singing that. And think about Beethoven. He wrote his entire Ninth Symphony, deaf. He could do that because of course, he understood some things that maybe somebody who's not a musician doesn't understand, but because he could hear. He could hear how the violin would sound there. He could hear where the timpani needed to play. Just amazing. But what's even more amazing, if our little ears can do all of that, distinguish. If Fred Martin called me today, I would know it was Fred Martin. I wouldn't have to look at my phone to see his name. When he said hello, I would know it was Fred. And my ears can hear a mosquito buzzing at the same time I'm listening to my neighbor's lawnmower. We have these just phenomenal abilities. But what does that say about our Creator God? If we are made in His image, what does that say about God's ability to hear? Anybody want to speak to that?
Where can I hide from your spirit?
That's right. Where can I hide from your spirit or from your ears, Lord? It's always been amazing to me. Like, it's Sunday morning, and how many millions and millions and millions of people are praying to God these hours on Sunday morning, and yet He hears every prayer. He knows my voice. And I'm sure He does, because I sure talk to Him a whole lot. But the key is we have to listen for His voice too. But just our hearing says so much about our great God. Then there's the whole balance thing. Most of you know that Bill, back a number of years ago, we just were cruisers. We loved to sail. We logged over 300 days on one particular cruise line. We just loved being on the water. And I only got seasick a couple of times, and that was enough. But when I came home, I had this strange sensation for 2 or 3 weeks that I was still on the ship and things were moving. And unfortunately, we'd usually return home on a Saturday, and then I was supposed to be in church to play for worship on Sunday morning. And the keyboard was going like this while I'm trying to play, and I walked kind of funny. And it just so happened, I just never gave it too much thought. I just lived with it a few days, and it eventually would clear up. But a good doctor who was our doctor, and he happened to be a friend, and he knew we had been cruising, and he called us and said, "How was the cruise? I'm thinking about taking my wife on a cruise." And I said, "Well, it was really wonderful. In fact, I feel like I'm still cruising." And I've been at home for a week. And he said, "Oh," and I'm not going to, probably there's a French speaker out there who's going to recognize that I'm murdering this, but he said, "Oh, you have mal débarquement." And I said, "What?" And he repeated it. He said, "It's a French term." And he began to tell me why I was experiencing what I was experiencing. But I understood that that French term meant, I don't know where the floor is. And it's because inside our ears, there's a little pouch of these tiny, tiny, tiny little pebbles. So if anybody ever tells you you got rocks in your head, it's the truth. You do. And the days of, 2 weeks on the ocean and you're constantly swaying, some of those little sand-like pebbles got out of place into maybe a different place in the inner ear, and it had me off balance. And our doctor friend told me what to do to lie on the floor. It was a simple fix. Just turn your head one way and leave it for a moment, and then turn your head another way and leave it for a few moments. And I did that a few times a day. And sure enough, those ear rocks fell back into where they were supposed to be. So our ears also give us assistance with our balance. Another thing about our ears, my daddy had a workshop. He made some beautiful things in his workshop, and my little nephew kind of grew up with my dad in that workshop. And my dad had a table that was so unstable because that kid had drilled so many holes in it and hammered nails. And Daniel was 5 or 6, and he was out in the shop with daddy and doing something. And daddy asked him, Daniel, I'd like you to stop that. Daniel just kept doing what he was doing, paid no attention to daddy. And daddy walked over and he said, Daniel, do you need to have your hearing checked? And Daniel's reply was, no, sir. I had my hearing checked at school and it's just fine. Well, maybe our hearing is fine, but sometimes we need our listening checked. I've asked Elaine if she would to read us some scripture this morning. She's going to be reading a couple of verses from Proverbs and Revelation about hearing and listening. Elaine, would you read from Proverbs, please?
Yes, and this is from the Message. Proverbs 21:13. If you stop your ears to the cries of the poor, your cries will go unheard, unanswered. And then Revelations 3:20. Look at me. I stand at the door. I knock. If you hear me call, open the door. I'll come right in and sit down to supper with you.
Thank you, Elaine. Anybody else have a verse that you remember about hearing? Remember, Paul tells us to be ye doers of the word and not hearers only. Somehow I think that's related to that proverb that you just read, Elaine.
Phyllis,
Yes. Yes,
verse
Fred.
James that says, be quick to listen and slow to anger.
Listening. Yes. Thank you for that.
Of course,
Bill?
Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he closed it with those words, those who have ears, let them hear.
Yes, he did. Truth is, we have all kinds of things that come into our ears on a daily basis. But listening it's kind of a learned discipline. If you remember, early, I think in the first session, I told you the story about two Katies. Katie, my 92-year-old philanthropist friend who was like a second mom to me. She was very dear to me, and I had been to visit her one day, and when Bill returned in the afternoon, he asked me how was my visit with Katie, and I said, well, it was good, but Bill, she wanted me to help her plan her funeral. And Bill said, well, did you do that? And I said, no, I just couldn't do that. Well, why couldn't you do that? And I had a whole lot of excuses, as my daddy would say. I didn't have a good reason. I just had a lot of excuses, and I just wasn't ready to talk about Katie's dying. And she had told me, she said, I just am so ready to go be with Jesus. Everybody I know and love, my family, they're there, and I don't know why I have to wait. And she said, I just want to go to sleep and wake up with Jesus. And I was responding with, oh, no, 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 Katie, because I would be the one to find you, and I don't want you to be alone when you die. So I had my reasons for not wanting to help Katie plan her funeral. And you know why I was having trouble? Because I wasn't listening. It was more about me than it was about Katie's need. So guess what I did the next time I went to Katie's house? We took my notebook and we sat down and we planned her funeral. Of course, she wanted Bill to bring the message, and she wanted one song sung. And that's because Katie had lived her life knowing that she was created for a purpose, and she did her best to live out that purpose every day. She wanted me to sing, Jesus loves me. What a testimony to a very beautiful life, well lived. So, what do you think keeps you from listening?
Action.
Thank you, Mark.
We have our own agenda, our own ideas, so we don't want to listen to some that we don't agree with.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Anybody else?
I think so, kind of what Anna's saying. If you feel strongly about an opinion and you want to be heard more than you want to hear, I can take precedence for me. I know sometimes.
We all.
Yeah, I think so many times when a person starts talking to you and telling you about something, your mind automatically starts thinking about yourself, and your mind is thinking, well, I've done that before, only I might have tackled something bigger than that, or I might have suffered more than that. So you're thinking of yourself rather than what the other person's saying.
So true.
Yeah, another
Also-
area is listening to refute rather than understand.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Absolutely.
We have a talk during the Kairos weekend on active listening. And I think what Les just talked about, we call Me Tooism.
Mm. And I find myself sometimes not listening as well as I should because I'm trying to think of how am I going to respond to that.
Yeah.
Bill, I saw your hand, love.
Yeah, my biggest problem is God's created me, and I don't know if it's the rest of y'all, but God created me funny in that my heart somehow is in between my ears and my brain because my brain only receives things coming through my heart. So the heart oftentimes is so focused on some things that I can't hear. I think the heart is the key to how we listen. We only listen to what our heart wants to listen to.
Good. Well, just remember what Epictetus the Stoic tells us. God created us with 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Love it.
So maybe we should be listening twice as much as we speak. But listening is hard. But aren't we grateful for ears? And then to think, God gave us eyes. Leonardo da Vinci, one of the world's greatest artists of all history, said this, and I'm going to read this quote because I want you to get it. Who would believe that so small a space could contain the images of the universe? Oh, mighty process, what talent can avail to penetrate a nature such as this? What tongue will it be that can unfold so great a wonder? Truly none. Eyes, God's gift to us to help us see. The eye is only about 1 inch in diameter, but it is the most complex organ in your body. It's basically like a camera. It lets the light in through the cornea, and your pupil controls the amount of light that comes through, and then it hits the retina, and then the retina records that and sends it through the optic nerve to the brain, and then the brain interprets it. And you would think that would take a very long time, but it doesn't. Billions of those signals are going out all the time from your eyes to your optic nerve and to your brain. There are other parts of the eye that play other roles. Some carry fluids. How many of you have dry eye? I think everybody has dry eye these days. We spend too much time in front of our computer screens, but some carry fluids to lubricate and nourish the eye. Then we have muscles that allow the eye to move. And then your eyelids, your eyelashes protect the eyes from some injury. And God gave us two of those too. Did you know that your eyes see things a little bit different? You're looking at different angles, and those the light coming in from those different angles then is translated, and our brain reads it, and we get a wider angle. It interprets for us, and it also helps us with our depth perception. Charles Darwin, was the father of the theory of evolution. And he described, and I'm going to read this too, the eye as one of the greatest challenges to my theory of evolution. To suppose that the eye, with all its contrivances, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. And then he wrote in a letter to one of his friends, who was also a botanist, to this day, the eye makes me shudder. A very, very complex organ. 127 million light-sensitive rods and cones that convert light into electrical impulses that your brain reads. We have the ability to see, with the right conditions, a lit candle 15 miles away. We can see a fly on the end of my nose, and I can see a star in the night sky that's light years away. Bill and I had the real gift of touring Carlsbad Caverns with a friend of ours who was a geologist. He had worked in different places in the world, and as we traveled Carlsbad Caverns, and it was right after 9/11, and can you believe the four of us, he and his wife and Bill and I, were the only four people at Carlsbad Caverns that day. So we had the geology lesson, and we had the park ranger all to ourselves. Do I remember all the geology lessons? No. But what I do remember is when the park ranger took us into the largest cavern there, I wish I'd looked up the name of it, but it is just mammoth. It's so huge. And she had us sit down in a particular place, and she said, okay, now I want you to be still. And she flipped a switch and turned out the light. And I'm here to tell you that one experience gave me it gave a different meaning to that old phrase about it was so dark you could cut it out in chunks. I mean, it was dark. And then she lit a match. And all of a sudden, that one little match lit up that cavern again. Just a little bit of light. There, Bill, you could preach a sermon on that. It does not take much light, but it does take light for us to see. I've asked Elaine to read another proverb and then a verse from Matthew about our sense of sight and a little bit about the hearing.
And again, this is from a Message, Proverbs 20, verse 12. Ears that hear and eyes that see. We get our basic equipment from God. And then Matthew 6:22. Your eyes are windows to your body. If you open your eyes wide in wonder and belief, your body fills up with light. If you live squinty-eyed in greed and distrust, your body is a musty cellar.
Thank you, Elaine. Don't want to live squinty-eyed. In Hebrews 11, we read about Moses. This talks about focus. By faith, Moses, when grown, refused the privileges of the Egyptian royal house. He chose a hard life with God's people rather than an opportunistic, soft life of sin with the oppressors. By an act of faith, he turned his heel on Egypt. Indifferent to the king's blind rage, he had his eye on the one no eye can see, and he kept right on going. His eye on the one no one can see. When our grandson Austin, who's 27 now and about 6'6", when he was a little tyke, about 5 years old, he and his mom were out in their yard in Corpus Christi, and Austin wanted to water the flowers. And Kim told him, "Oh, we don't need to water the flowers today. God sent the rain yesterday, so we don't need to water the flowers." And he said, "Mom, where is God?" The one no one can see. And Kim said, "Well, just look around. He's in the sky, he's in the flowers, he's in the trees, and he's in my heart." That's a difficult concept for a little one, but they're so trusting. As my daddy would say, sometimes we can't see for looking. You have to ponder that a little bit. You know, doctors warn us about staring into the bright sunlight. Remember those glasses we had to wear during the eclipse to protect our eyes, because the light comes in and it sears that image onto our retina, and it really damages our eyes. But what about our focus on Jesus? He is the light of the world. Would that when we focus on him, the image of God is seared into our retina, and we can have a perception of God as we focus on him. So, how do you focus on Christ? Somebody speak up. How do you focus on the living Christ?
Well, you know, in Kairos, we always sang a song. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. And that was a very energetic song for that group and for those of us who were on the teams. And then, you know, we're told that will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee. Powerful lesson.
Don't you love that word stayed? We don't use that word much anymore, but I love that word. Thank you, Roger. Anybody else?
Well, I would say not enough. I think our thoughts tend to turn to more worldly things.
Yep.
I think just by sitting quietly and just accepting what comes, that's one way to do it. But again, going back to what Mark said, the cares of the world tend to intrude unless, for me, I have to be really, really intentional. And I don't find it to come naturally unless I really work at it.
Thank you. And I think, Julie, that's true for most of us. Bill?
I think one of the things that helps me is that our brain remembers things best that it can picture. Some of us have a hard time remembering a bunch of words, but we can easily remember pictures. And that's one of the reasons that we need Easter. Is that when it comes around, we get a lot of pictures of Jesus suffering, dying, being resurrected, and those pictures get planted in our mind. It's kind of like people who look at ugly, hateful stuff all the time in movies. They get those pictures running around their brain so much that they block out all the good stuff. I think if we immerse ourselves in the pictures of what Jesus did, we immerse ourselves in beautiful pictures of his creation. He gave us eyes to flood our minds with wonderful, meaningful pictures. And I just think the memory, the brain, really helps us if there's just not much room for that ugly stuff.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Anybody else?
Phyllis, one thought that comes into my mind is habit. As far as, so like in the morning, I have a devotional that I read in the morning first thing. It's a habit I have. I mean, you're having breakfast and the book sitting there and you go, okay, so I'm gonna open this book and read the devotional. And it kind of sets the tone for the day. So when you're going through the day, there's times when you think back to that devotional, being thankful, being aware of people in need, all that kind of stuff can be triggered from that morning's habit, basically, or starting on the right foot.
Absolutely. It's the same things that help us to focus on someone we love. We spend time with them. We talk to them. We read God's word. And I tell you, one of the things that really helps me to focus is this group. When I think about all the good that God is doing in the world because of your hands at work in the world, that really helps me focus on Jesus and his activity in the world. There's a wonderful other part of our vision that God gives us. We not only have focus, but when we focus on something, we have peripheral vision. And I can tell you, when you focus on Jesus, the things in your peripheral vision are going to change a bit. You're going to look at people differently. Maybe not all the time, as Julie says, these are disciplines that are learned. They're not easy because we're bombarded with other signals all the time. But we're going to look at people differently. Remember the other young Katie that I told you about on the first Sunday when I was called down to the emergency room at University Hospital as I was a volunteer chaplain? And she was a young, beautiful, just beautiful girl. And this was not her first attempt to take her life. And I can tell you, I went in with fear and trembling. I had spoken with her father, kind of gotten the story. And I went into the little cubicle where she was, and I introduced myself. And I was not welcomed. And you have to learn, as I'm sure Mark and Jan, you have to learn sometimes your patients are a little bit angry, and you just have to remember they're in the hospital, not because they're well and happy, but they're sick and they're hurting, they're suffering, and sometimes they speak to you out of those feelings. And so I was trying to listen to her, and honestly, I was trying to formulate my thoughts as to how I was going to respond, and I was praying. I could do all that at one time because I was desperate. And I knew that I needed to find some common ground and maybe talk about something other than what brought her to the hospital that day. And I'm not going to give you all the details, but I learned in the conversation that she loved music. And she was a songwriter. And we began to talk about music and songwriting. And all of a sudden, she sat up in her bed and sat kind of Indian style, cross-legged, and she patted on the bed And you know what that was? That was my invitation to sit with her. And we had a wonderful conversation about music, which God helped me, I can tell you, because I was not capable of this on my own. I began to tell her, and I said, I'm a much older person than you are. And would you agree that I might have had a few more life experiences than you've had? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Her language even changed because it was foul language when I first walked in that door. And I said, well, I'm basically a joy-filled person. That doesn't mean I don't have bad days and I don't have troubles, but I have a joy in my heart because I know that God loves me and He created me for a purpose. And Katie, He created you for a purpose. Nobody can write the songs that you can write. And I asked if I could pray with her and maybe if I could come back for a visit with her. And she agreed. But I tried in my simple way to communicate to her that she was fearfully and wonderfully made because I saw her that way. You're going to see people like Katie differently if you focus on Jesus. I know what happened to my friend, my 92-year-old friend Katie. I don't know what happened to young Katie. I hope that I will know one day, but I have to trust God for His work in her life. Another thing that you're going to see when you focus on Jesus, thing you're going to see in your peripheral vision is some, wow, would you look at that kind of experiences? Most of you've traveled various parts of the world, and you've seen some magnificent creations of God, just those wow kinds of experiences. You see them differently when you focus on Jesus because you know where they're coming from. Bill and I, several years ago, had a friend. She was a school teacher and a grandmother, and she was taking care of her two grandchildren because of a dysfunctional situation in their family. And the little boy was about 4, and he had kind of developed this routine of constantly tattling on his older sister. And she was trying to work with him on that, but he was outside playing. She was in the kitchen looking out the window to make sure he was safe. And he started calling her, Meemaw, Meemaw, come here, come here. And she just kind of figured it was part of his routine of tattling. So she just ignored him until he just became insistent in a way that she dropped what she was doing and she walked out the back door. Not very happy. And then when she got outside, he said, Meemaw, look. And he pointed to the late afternoon sunset and said, look, Meemaw, look what God did today. You're going to have those kinds of experiences when you focus on Christ and your peripheral vision changes such that you see people as living God-made, God-loved souls, and you see His creation and appreciate it. So with our ears and our eyes, it's about hearing and seeing and focus and balance and peripheral vision. But Paul tells us in Hebrews about really focusing. And I want to read this. It's from the Message. Keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race we're in. Study how He did it, because Jesus never lost sight of where He was headed. that exhilarating finish in and with God. He could put up with anything along the way, the cross, shame, whatever. And now he's there in the place of honor right alongside God. So when you find yourselves flagging in your faith, go over that story again, item by item, that long litany of hostility that he plowed through. That will shoot adrenaline into your souls. That's good news. That's good instruction for us to focus on Christ, study how he did it. And then if you want something to really shout about, think about this. Even with the most wonderful creation of our eyes and our ears, Paul says, oh yeah, I know you've seen and you've heard a whole lot of stuff, but no one has ever seen or heard anything like this. Never so much as imagined anything quite like it. What God has arranged for those who love him. How marvelous is that? So go today. If you didn't do your homework last night, try for a few minutes today just to sit, let your eyes take in God's beauty, and let your ears listen for his voice. Amen. Ralph,
Amen.
yours.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm the Ralph substitute today because Ralph had.
Hey,
Sure.
bless.
So, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for the lesson you gave us today, and just the reminders. I know whenever anybody points out just the miracle of the human body, and people talk about, well, we just evolved from something. You can take any part of your body and you think about what's there, and everything that's involved. You think, who but God could put this together? So it's just amazing. So thank you for taking us through that. Also, from about the first week, I've been waiting for the rest of the story on Katie. And so it's kind of like reading a book, a mystery novel where you threw it out there and you said, okay, I'm going to circle back later on. So I've been waiting for you to circle back and tell us about Katie. So thanks for sharing that as well. And it's always, Phyllis, we just love your teaching. So thank you so much. I know you put a lot of work into this. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, dude.